Lamar with the draft less than 3 weeks away. Will he fall into the Steelers' lap? Somebody here says not a shot. Plus, Cowboys linebacker DeMarvion Overshown joins the show today. We're going to dive into all things Cowboys, including an update on his recovery and what fans should expect this season. And we're putting the AFC North on the clock. We dive into what each team should do in the draft if they want to get ahead of the rest of their division rivals. Welcome to NFL Live. I'm Hannah Storm alongside Louis Riddick and Jordan Reed. Booger McFarland will be joining us in just a bit. So a handful of teams started their offseason workouts this week. The Jets, with new head coach Aaron Glenn, was one of those teams, and their new quarterback Justin Fields spoke with the media today for the first time as a Jet and talked about reuniting with his Ohio State teammate Garrett Wilson.
I mean, it's awesome. Of course, we played together in college, and, when I saw him, it's really just like the old days. So I don't think our relationship skipped a beat. So, of course, I'm definitely excited to play with him, guys like Ruck and, Josh Myers. So I'm excited for that. And, of course, things that we can do to help get each other better, just, get back on the same page as we were in college. And, of course, communicate, make sure we're always on the same page when it comes to concepts and routes and what he's doing in certain situations. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to be back on the field with him for sure.
Louis, it'll be so cool to see them together. What would you like to see from Justin under Tanner Eggstrain, who also came from the Lions?
I think it's exactly what Justin really just referred to, which was see that just that comfort, that familiarity. Not having quarterback, wide receiver communication errors, having things kind of go very smoothly. And I think that's something that the Jets were very cognizant of and very aware of heading into this free agency period after Aaron Glenn was hired, in regards to, in particular, making sure that Garrett Wilson was happy and that Garrett Wilson was someone who felt as though the team was kind of moving in the right direction on his behalf, because considering how things ended between him and Aaron Rodgers last year. And I think that was one of the things, and one of the things that the Jets really were thinking about when they signed Justin Fields was, how does this mesh with Garrett, and how could this really help them both get on the same page? It was something I talked about with them during my interview process when I sat down and talked with them. And it was something that I had in my mind. Look, Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson, all the other players from Ohio State that are on the Jets roster, you hope that once mini camps roll around, once OTAs roll around, that you can see that start to manifest itself with good productive play on the field. And I think it will. I really do think it will.
Yeah, he's one of their biggest stars, so him shining can only benefit this team. And the Jets have the 7th pick. Here they are again in the top 10. Jordan, they need quite a few things. Where do you see them going with that?
Yeah, you're right, Hannah. They have quite a few needs, but I believe their biggest need is at right tackle along that offensive line spot. You take the left tackle last year in Olu Fashanu. This year, I believe they need to come back and select Armand Mbembu out of Mizzou, who I believe is one of the cleanest prospects in this year's draft class. 6'4", 330 pounds. You know exactly what you're getting with him. Only gave up 1 sack this past season. Went to the combine and absolutely crushed it there. So he's another one of these prospects that's he's checked every single box each step of the way during the pre-draft process. And if I'm the Jets, a new general manager, new head coach, I want to make sure I know exactly who I'm getting with my first ever draft pick of my regime, and that would be Armand Mbembu out of Mizzou.
Absolutely, because the last thing you want fans saying is same old Jets. That is a refrain that they're trying to move past. All right, now we move on to another team, and that would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. They started workouts this week. Today, quarterback Trevor Lawrence and new head coach Liam Cohen spoke to the media about improving the quarterback's footwork.
So this is a great opportunity now that he is a little limited from a throwing standpoint, that we can dive into the footwork. He can dive into it on his own time. So now it's just about, okay, how do we fine tune it and just tighten it up a little bit to get him in a place where he's comfortable to cut the ball loose on time and in rhythm, regardless of the circumstances.
There's some things I've known about my footwork over the years of playing that I felt like have been a little bit of a weakness. The system is built around timing and tying your feet to your progression and playing on time. And so it allows you to get backside, allows you to get to check downs or whatever it may be, and you can feel comfortable playing on time. And more than any system I've ever learned, it's structured and based on that.
So Liam Cohen is getting this gig in a large part because of what he was able to do with Baker Mayfield last season with Cohen as his offensive coordinator. Baker said career best in passing touchdowns, in yards, in completion percentage, and in off-target percentage. Lewis, it was interesting hearing Trevor there. He sounds pretty self-aware in terms of his footwork and the things that he obviously needs to improve. He's being paid like a top-tier quarterback, but hasn't really played like one. Do you see him as progressing with Cohen upcoming this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that, Liam Cohen will be able to provide Trevor with some things that allow him to take his game to another level from a fundamental standpoint, although I would be hard-pressed to say that Doug Peterson, his former coach, was not someone who stressed some of those footwork, tying your feet with your, with your upper body and with your timing. I would be hard-pressed to say that it wasn't something that was really emphasized with him, because I know that it is, because I know how Doug coaches the position. Now, I think really what's going to determine Trevor Lawrence's improvement is more so when you're talking about self-awareness. I think it's those times where things get sideways for Trevor, how he's able to stay on track, how he's able to get himself back on track, rather, how he's able to kind of find that timing and that rhythm and get himself in that headspace to where things don't continue to snowball on him. And then all of a sudden he starts to forget all the fundamental things from a physical perspective and a mental perspective that got him to where he is. We've talked about that with him in person when we were over in London a year ago, and it was something that he was quite aware of, the fact that he needed to improve that part of his game. When things start kind of getting off the rails, how can he kind of like center himself again and stay on the right track? And I think that's where Liam Cohen or any other coach, I think that's where they really need to really drill down on quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, so they can do those kinds of things and not have those long stretches then where their game just doesn't look like it really like how they want it to be, and that they aren't really playing up to their potential. If he can do that, Trevor can do everything physically that any other quarterback in the NFL can do. It's the mental part of the game, the consistency part of the game that I'm looking to see him improve upon.
Right, the mental more than the mechanics. That makes total sense, especially what you said, given Doug Peterson is so strong in that area and with quarterbacks. Jordan, so they have 2 picks in the top 36. Let's start with number 5 overall. What makes sense to you there?
Yeah, well, one of the most common prospect and also team pairings that you'll see in early mock drafts is Mason Graham going to Jacksonville, finding that centerpiece along this very talented defensive front already with Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines Allen, even Eric Armstead. They still don't have that huge centerpiece in the middle of their defense. I believe Mason Graham can be that. He's one of the 3 blue chip players in this year's class, in my opinion, along with Travis Hunter, and then also Abdul Carter. Yes, the weight was a little bit concerning at Combine, weighing in at 296 pounds, but he came back at Pro Day and weighed in at 306 pounds. I think Mason Graham will really complete that defensive line that they have going on in Jacksonville. That's already really talented, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, it makes sense that they continue to build out their defensive line to the degree where, they have an inside push and an outside guy, and they can really just have it be a front four that can really get after people. I think on the offensive side of the ball, when you're talking about Jacksonville and we're talking about Trevor Lawrence, you need someone really to pair with Brian Thomas Jr. and continue to allow Trevor to have weapons that are diversified, that can attack the middle of the field and attack down the field outside the numbers. And Emeka Egbuka is one of those guys from Ohio State when you're talking about maybe